Hello, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, and everyone else here in witness to the trial of the people of Scandinavia versus Old Man Kratos. This is a man who has committed a lot of heinous acts in his time, and in this, the current year, we're going to be trying him for all his crimes in accordance to American laws and regulation. Now, I am neither a lawyer nor an American, so to those in the jury and all around the world, you are encouraged to add any additional charges that the court may have missed. Let the trial commence. Now, I would like to say, first of all, that the reason this video took so long, this trial took so long, was because, these games are massive. And canonically speaking, Kratos and Atreus, in fact, commit 100% of the acts within these games. They don't just do the story path. So compiling all these charges for these two games and the DLC has taken by far and away longer than the rest of the series combined. However, these charges are specifically for Kratos and not Atreus. Perhaps Atreus will be liable for his own trial at some point, but at least in the first game, he's below the age of criminal responsibility, so anything he does falls squarely on his legal guardian, which is Kratos. Also, as was the case before, any crime committed against monsters will not count towards the overall sentencing, because monsters aren't people, they don't have rights. This includes such things as these repeated boss fights. The only thing we're counting are crimes committed against humans, humanoid beings, and animals. Also, seeing as this entire domain belongs to Odin, we will assume that every crime committed that doesn't involve living creatures, such as theft or destruction of property, will be a crime specifically against Odin. So it's all counted. Other than that, I don't think we have any conditions to cover. Now, first of all, we have trespassing. It's difficult to know just how many charges of trespassing that Kratos commits, given the fact that he was trespassing from the moment he stepped onto Nordic ground. So is it just one big charge, one for every realm? One for every realm as well as the space between the realms like the world tree? Or do I count all of the above as well as once for every secret area you can go to? I don't know, that's the issue with open-ended games, open-ended adventures like these. But then again, one should count it every time he moves between realms in that case, but then again, the amount of times one moves between realms will vary from person to person. Though in the story, you have to travel to and from Alfheim once, Helheim twice, and Jotunheim once. Then theoretically, you have to go to and from Muspelheim and Niflheim once to 100% the game. And when you're traveling between the realms, you also theoretically might travel via the world tree. Also, while the realms are one unique area, you also have to take into consideration that Midgard has 23 unique areas by my count. God damn, there's too many variables. Okay, so I'm just gonna say that my final tally will be 3 charges for every time he traveled to a realm. Once on the way there, once on the way back, and once for using the world tree. I'm also adding 1 charge for every unique area in Midgard because canonically it's the 100% run. You have to visit all of them. Making my final tally, including the initial traveling to Midgard, 42 counts of trespassing. But wait, he also goes into the light of Alfheim, which I believe counts as an extra count of trespassing because it's an entirely different plane of existence. As well as an extra one if you count him returning to Alfheim as a separate count. And later on, you go to both Tyr's Vault, as well as the Jotunheim Tower between the realms, which each should count separately. So let's just go with 46 counts of trespassing, which can carry a sentence of upwards of 1 year in prison. As well as a fine of a few $100s, let's just say 5. Already, the defendant's charges are complicated, and they're only about to get more complicated. Since the place in which Kratos set up home is owned by Odin, that would mean that Kratos would have 1 charge of squatting, which if successfully proven can carry a sentence of upwards of 6 months and a $5,000 fine. Plus, building the house would mean that he would have to chop down a lot of trees and move a lot of earth, which would classify as destruction of property, which carries a maximum sentence of upwards of 10 years. But that's not the only count of destruction of property that he commits. You also have a significant chunk of the forest during the first fight with Baldur, 9 separate slabs that keep these dragons leashed, you have the portal to Jotunheim, you have the Bifrost temple / travel room, which you have to flip over at one point, 11 doors to secret locations that you have to break open, a large chunk of an Alfheim temple, another large chunk of an Alfheim temple, a good chunk of the upper mountain in Midgard, the elevator on the mountain, this massive stone platform on the way to Thamur's corpse, the area in and around Thamur's corpse. They greatly damaged the boat in Helheim, as well as the secret chamber of Odin, and they destroy a statue of Thor for a total of 33 counts of destruction of property. Then there's the weapons you possess. There are plenty of upgrades that he can make to them, but objectively speaking there's only 2, which gives us 2 counts of possession of weapons for dangerous purposes, which is a 10-year sentence. It also counts towards illegal possession of weapons, which can count towards a 3-year prison sentence. They also count as weapons of mass destruction, especially because at least one of them caused mass destruction, which is a lifetime sentence. Then there's the curious case of Fae. I'm pretty sure that in the modern day you're obliged to have a body looked at by a medical examiner or a coroner to determine the cause of death and make sure there's no foul play. But I can't seem to find any info on that law and what breaking it would result in. So I believe that's up for anyone else to figure out if you feel so obliged, though he's starting a fire on someone else's property, so I believe that would count as 1 count of arson, which can carry a sentence of upwards of 14 years. Also, immediately following this, Kratos and Atreus hunt without a license, and they do so once again later on in the Witch's Woods, which can result in a sentence of 1 year and a $2,000 fine per offense. Then we have charges of theft. I've heard differing opinions on this matter, but apparently felony theft can land you upwards of 20 years in prison. However, petty theft can land you upwards of a year in prison. Now, there is a lot of theft in this game, and it's hard to know exactly what the value is of each individual pickup. So to make it easy, I'm just gonna say that standard pickups like treasure will count as petty theft, and major priceless artifacts will count as felony theft. In layman's terms, major game items. As for standard items, thanks to this handy-dandy interactive map, I was able to figure out the amount of items in this game that he can steal. The total I came to was 117 wooden chests, 117 stone chests, 51 legendary chests, 22 Nornir chests, 12 pieces of the Dew of Yggdrasil, and no less than 294 individual hack silver pickups. Not sure if the hack silver should count, seeing as those are just discarded items that people leave laying around. It's like finding a $5 bill on the ground. You're not stealing it, it's just there for anyone. But even without it, that's still 319 counts of petty theft. So he's already nailed to the cross in that regard. And as for felony theft, well, they steal the Light of Alfheim, they steal the stonemason's chisel tip, they steal Mimir's head, which is pretty valuable, same with that dragon tooth. Kratos steals the heart of that troll, and while trolls aren't human, and therefore this doesn't count as murder, the heart of the troll is still considered a very valuable item. That also goes for the Winds of Hell. He takes that jar of wine from Odin's treasure trove, that's gotta cost a mint. Then there's the Unity Stone, the whetstone from the Raiders, that knife in that dead guy's back, Avardi's hammer, 3 separate stronghold keys, 9 Valkyrie helmets, and I think the only other example of felony theft would be Mimir's other eye, which is also considered quite valuable. So all in all, I believe that's 26 counts of felony theft. They also steal a giant-ass boat in Helheim, so the prosecution is counting that as 1 count of Grand Theft Auto, which is a maximum sentence of 10 years. And now let's get to animal cruelty. First of all, we have 51 of Odin's ravens, counting for 1 charge apiece, and we have that hog that Atreus shoots at the behest of Kratos, that dragon with the indecipherable name, and that other dragon that Baldur flies in on, for a total of 54 counts. A charge that can carry a sentence of upwards of 7 years in some places. Then there's the case of prison breach, an offense that can carry a sentence of upwards of 10 years in prison. We have 3 dragons and Mimir accounting for 4 counts, as well as 1 count of attempted prison breach when they attempt to break Freya into Alfheim, which can carry a sentence of upwards of 2 years. In the beginning of the game, when Baldur shows up, Kratos threatened him, and uttering threats is an offense that can carry upwards of 2 years in prison. This entire fight can be seen as disturbing the peace, which can carry a 1-year prison sentence. Kratos is also technically resisting arrest from an authority working for the government of this land, so that's another charge which can carry a sentence of upwards of 2 years. Then we have abuse of a corpse. There's Thamor, or Thamor, or whatever the f***. You have the bodies of the 5 wayward spirits, as well as that father that got stabbed in the back, for a total of 7 charges. Abuse of a corpse can net you upwards of 2 years in prison. Now we get to the fun stuff, assault, murder, etc. So we have assault and battery, 10 years maximum, aggravated assault, 14 years maximum, assault with a deadly weapon, 10 years maximum, and assault causing bodily harm, maximum 10 years. We have 3 such cases at the beginning of the game with Baldur, because he kept healing himself. We have a further case when he ambushes you at the top of the mountain, and in the final boss we have 2 cases because he only healed himself once. Every time he healed himself, the clock reset on the charges, which also meant that every time he healed, it was another attempted murder until the eventual murder, which is a lifetime sentence. Speaking of attempted murder, Hilda Savini, or however that's pronounced, does have a humanoid form, so that technically counts as attempted murder when he was shot at the behest of Kratos. Though no assault charges. Later on we have Magni and Modi. The assault charges stick, along with only one count of attempted murder because Magni dies. Though Modi does have a second round of these charges including attempted murder later on, so it balances out. Then there's the Valkyries, 9 to be exact. Each one counts for all the assault charges as well as dismembering a human body when you rip off their wings, which is a 30-year prison sentence. I know they're not human, but close enough. And the same charge counts for Mimir, who's dismembered by Kratos. At his request, sure, but that's still illegal? This isn't Sweden? It's also worth mentioning that if Baldur and the twins are working for Odin, they have the authority to arrest people. So assaulting them counts as assaulting a police officer, which can carry a lifetime sentence. To the prosecution's memory, that's everything, so the total count here is 17 counts of assault and battery, aggravated assault, assault with a deadly weapon, and assault causing bodily harm, 8 counts of assaulting a police officer, 8 counts of attempted murder, 10 counts of dismembering a human body, then we get to the murder. There are 13 total counts, and I think the only 2 that were spontaneous were Magni and Modi. Everything else was premeditated to some degree. So 11 counts of first-degree murder and 2 counts of second-degree murder. Either way, it's a life sentence for both. And that's everything for Kratos' charges in 2018, however his charges during the period we refer to as Ragnarok is a longer list. God help me. Now, it should be mentioned that by the time of Ragnarok, Atreus was beyond the age of criminal responsibility, which means that anything he does on his own volition will not count towards the overall count for Kratos. Let's start with something easy. Theft. For the petty theft in Ragnarok, we have apparently only 25 wooden chests, which I'm certain is not true. So as a conservative estimate, I'm going to quadruple that number to 100. But that's only an estimate as I don't feel like counting myself. Then we have 36 red coffins, 60 legendary chests, 35 Nornir chests, 11 pieces of the Dew of Yggdrasil, 10 pieces of buried treasure, and 10 miscellaneous pieces of loot, accounting for 262 counts of petty theft. And as for felony theft, you have the more story-relevant loot, 38 various artifacts, then he steals the Gjallarhorn off of Heimdall, he stole the hilt of Skofnung, possession of the Draupnir spear means that Kratos illegally possessed the priceless Draupnir, you take 9 different Yggdrasil seeds for transportation, then there's Odin's noose. You have the green scepter, and technically while Kratos didn't steal the mysterious mask, it's still in his possession, so from a technical standpoint, he kind of stole it, from a certain point of view. Don't at me. So all in all, that's 53 counts of felony theft. I swear, this guy stole practically every important item in the history of Norse mythology. It would only be better if he stole the Declaration of Independence. Next up, they begin the game by illegally hunting, and then they continue to illegally hunt later into the game, so that's 2 counts. As for destruction of property, surprisingly it's a little bit more thin on the ground this time. You have this statue of Tyr, the mine tracks in Svartalfheim, this big-ass door in Svartalfheim, the underground area in the Alfheim desert when releasing the giant jellyfish, and there are 2 of those. Then you have 3 mining towers, Freya's realm roots, 17 slabs controlling phantoms, several parts of Helheim, the dam, and Asgard as a whole. And quite frankly, I don't know how many specific counts the destruction of Asgard would count for. So let's just say that's all one big charge, since we have more than enough to nail him to the cross. So all in all, we have 30 counts of destruction of property. Then there's also the instances of breaking and entering, of which I counted 7 specific instances. The mines of Svartalfheim, the underground areas of Alfheim, as well as the Elven Temple in Alfheim, the Elven Sanctum in Alfheim. Starting to feel like Hank Scorpio talking about hammocks.
There's the hammock hut, that's on 3rd. There's Hammocks R Us, that's on 3rd too. You got Put Your Butt There? That's on 3rd.
Then we have Freyr's Camp and the Vanaheim sinkholes. Breaking and entering can vary depending on time of day and intent, but can see you face upwards of 2 years. So let's just go with that. And speaking of breaking things, we once again have to address prison breach. This time, Kratos and his companions break Tyr out of prison not once but twice. One of them was even the real Tyr. Then Kratos frees Freya from the bonds that kept her bound to Midgard. Then Kratos assists in the prison breach of Freyr, where a lot of destruction of property happens around him, but very little of it can be attributed to him. Then there's Brigir, the man responsible for what is still to this day the most hilariously nonsensically dramatic sacrifice scene ever. Seriously, when he ostensibly sacrifices himself, I don't even think there was a single mandatory conversation you had with him up to that point in the entire game. Either way, you save him from the Alfheim sinkholes, which is a sort of prison. Finally, there's the giant fish island that has a name that I cannot hope to pronounce. Normally, I feel like I can get away with these sort of things, but in this case, it's just too arcane. So that accounts for 6 counts of prison breach. But you can't break someone out of prison without trespassing, and once again, we have to try to calculate the number of trespassing charges in this game. Basically, what I did was I calculated the absolute, and I mean absolute, minimum amount of times you have to travel from realm to realm to 100% the game. Every time he transitions from realm to the world tree, to the realm between realms, back to the world tree, each transition counts as a single individual count of trespassing. So through my extensive and tedious research, the number I came up with is 63. The absolute minimum amount of times you need to travel around from realm to realm. And even then, that might be a conservative estimate because I don't remember if during the post-game if you have to travel to different realms multiple times to do quests and whatnot. Unfortunately, since I counted the individual regions of Midgard as specific areas last time, I'm also obliged to do the same here. And this time I counted 12 specific regions in Midgard, bringing the total up to 75. Fiddle-dee-dee. With that said, however, the court is undecided as whether or not they should count the realm between realms as an instance of trespassing, because while the Allfather rules over all the 9 realms, so technically it could be argued that Brock and Sindri only live here because he allows it, it also is distinctly their home. So it's like this picture right here. We'll just say it counts, but if the jury decides to nullify those charges, just subtract 9 instances of trespassing from that number. Then there's abuse of a corpse, with the 5 casualties of war side quests, 13 separate berserkers, and Garm is technically undead, and that thing comes back to undeath 3 times for 3 counts, bringing the total count to 21. And here's something I never considered. Before Ragnarok, when you're trying to recruit Surtur, it could be considered felony harassment, especially because you're essentially asking him to lay down his life, and felony harassment leads to a potential prison sentence of 10 years. Then of course, while Kratos had avoided this through most of the Norse saga, we have to bring back terrorism and conspiracy to commit terrorism when he commits to kicking off Ragnarok, which is destined to destroy Asgard, both of which carry a lifetime sentence. As a matter of fact, right before Ragnarok, it's actually established that Kratos and Faye both vandalized a large chunk of Midgard some time ago. I'm not sure if the statute of limitations has expired, but either way, the charges for vandalism is upwards of 1 year in prison. Then there's the meal you cook at the Eternal Flame. It's a meal that permanently alters your stats. I think that counts as manufacturing controlled substances, or drug production, which is a lifetime sentence. The court wishes it to be known that the jury is probably thinking this is getting a bit silly, but the court also wishes it to be known that... What kind of video do you think you're watching? This is inherently a very ridiculous concept. Now, we're going to be giving the weapons another look. This time, instead of 2 weapons, the defendant has 3 weapons, so they each count towards 1 individual count of possession of weapons for dangerous purposes, possession of illegal weapons, as well as the possession of 3 separate WMDs. However, the Draupnir Spear also has explosive capabilities, meaning that possession of the Draupnir Spear counts as 1 count of possession of explosives, which has a maximum prison sentence of 14 years. Now, as for animal cruelty, and boy isn't that a fun sentence, we have plenty. The monster Nidhogg, Garm, and in this case it's technically 3 counts because he's killed and revived twice. Then there's the 2 sled dogs. I mean, can you really look at me in the eye and say they weren't overworked sled dogs? Then you have Atreus in his bear form, the Huntress, Heimdall's mount Gultipur, 5 dragons, 4 mounts when dealing with the Inheriar, 48 of Odin's ravens, 6 Dreki, and a partridge in a pear tree. Not really that last one. for a total count of 72 individual counts of animal abuse. And as a matter of fact, technically because Atreus is both Kratos' child and an animal in this case, that also counts towards child abuse, which has a maximum sentence of 10 years. I was also going to include Atreus running away as child abandonment, but there's no way for Kratos to have stopped him. Although he does agree to let Atreus go back to Asgard later on, so screw it, let's just say that's 1 count of child abandonment. And that's a potential maximum sentence of 25 years. Finally, Kratos threatens Odin and Thor at his house, and later on threatens Odin once again for 3 counts of uttering threats. And his insistence on refusing peaceful conduct gives us 1 more count of disturbing the peace. And that brings us to our final of many charges, assault and murder. So when it comes to the big 4, assault and battery, aggravated assault, assault with a deadly weapon, and assault causing bodily harm, we have Freya twice, Thor twice, Atreus that 1 time, Hurst and Mist, Gná, Heimdall, and Odin. So right off the bat we have 10 counts of each. With that said, however, we also run into a bit of an issue in that there's a definitive amount of humanoid minor enemies that we have to fight, particularly with the Raiders and the Einherjar. When it comes to the Raider camps, I'm not sure if they're humans, but they're at least humanoid enough to pass for human, and there is a finite amount of them. Plus, unlike a lot of the creatures you encounter in either of these games, this is not something that can be classified as self-defense, even in the loosest sense. This is a situation where you're actually running into a Raider camp and killing Raiders unprompted. Why? Well, because they abuse and eat wolves, which in all honesty makes this perfectly moral, but morality and legality are not the same thing here, unfortunately. So we still have to charge Kratos for murder. I'm an animal lover, so that hurts. Still, I counted 29 raiders through the 4 camps, though the jury is encouraged to count for themselves because the prosecution may have missed a few. The Einherjar are a difficult thing to quantify though, because they are definitely human enough to be considered for an attempted murder charge, and there's a finite amount of them. Before and during Ragnarok, any Einherjar that are killed will immediately be brought back in Valhalla, so technically there's no killing them. That is until the end of the game when Asgard is destroyed and you have to send the Einherjar back to the afterlife permanently. So I thought that it would be most accurate to count the amount of surviving Einherjar as the number killed. Unfortunately, there's definitely more to the number because while the post-Ragnarok numbers are definitive, there's also at least 1 instance where the Einherjar can call for backup, something that the prosecution stopped from happening. Without backup, the total number of Einherjar is 50, and I don't think there was ever a point in where we saw 50 Einherjar at one time. So that could very well be the army of Odin right there, although with the backup, why don't we just guesstimate and push that number up to 60? However, because every time you kill an Einherjar, they come back in Valhalla, trying to quantify the exact amount of times that you assaulted any one of the Einherjar individually is too much of a mindfuck, so let's just say the prosecution nullifies all charges that happened before Ragnarok. I mean, in most of these cases, the self-defense argument could be used. The prosecution has nullified the self-defense argument for most of these individual charges on account of the fact that we're a biased courtroom, but with that said, in this case we're willing to make an exception. So let's just say the number is 60. That brings everything up to 99 counts of assault and battery, aggravated assault, assault with a deadly weapon, and assault causing bodily harm. Also, since Thor, Heimdall, as well as the 3 Valkyries we fight are technically government employees keeping the peace, each one of them counts as assaulting a police officer, meaning there would be 6 counts of that. Also, despite there being a lot of murder in this game, I can only think of 5 separate instances where, legally speaking, something could be considered attempted murder in the sense that Kratos fights someone but doesn't kill them. Thor twice, Freya twice, and Odin. However, once we get to the murder charges, the numbers are quite different. Both the Raider camps and the surviving Einherjar fights are premeditated, so those count as first degree, as does Gná. Really, the only 3 characters I can think of whose murder wasn't premeditated would be Hurst, Mist, and Heimdall. Everyone else either doesn't die or are killed by someone else. However, we also have to consider Surtur, who we do kill, but it was voluntary. However, once again, this isn't Sweden, so that type of thing isn't legal. So that technically makes this another case of first-degree murder. So that brings us to 90 counts of first-degree murder and 3 counts of second-degree murder. Plus Heimdall and one of the Valkyries was also dismembered by Kratos. Then you also dismember all the Berserkers, and I'm not sure if that counts because they're already dead. Why don't we just say they do? So that brings the total count up to 15, and that's it for Ragnarok. The prosecution would just like to say for the record, holy fuck. And then we have the Valhalla DLC. I mean, the Valhalla portion of the defendant's charges. And this is where things get a bit tricky. By this point, the authority of the land had been overthrown, and Kratos had a high position in the government as the heir apparent to the throne of the god of war and right-hand man to Freya, who is seemingly the de facto leader, which means that as far as Scandinavia is concerned, I believe that he has diplomatic immunity from all charges once Odin is defeated. Well, let's just say for the sake of example that he doesn't. What would he be charged with? Well, obviously, he has one count of trespassing, given the fact that he's going to the Forbidden Lands to get into Valhalla, then his initial entry into Valhalla is considered breaking and entering. For much of the DLC, that's really the only thing that he can be charged with, because a lot of what happens in the Valhalla DLC is an illusion within Valhalla. So most of the hypothetical crimes he commits aren't actually real. Even his weapons functionally disappear before entering the area. But there are a few more things. He does tangibly damage Valhalla at one point, which causes the entire thing to break, which I believe counts as destruction of property. Then there's the tier boss fights, which I'm pretty sure is legitimately tier and not some sort of illusion. Now, this is a consensual fight between two gods of war, but if we're really trying to nail Kratos to the cross here, then we can count each boss fight as an individual case of felonious assault. Meaning 4 counts of assault and battery, assault with a deadly weapon, and aggravated assault, though no bodily harm, which is good for tier. I mean, frankly, he literally asked for it. I mean, literally asked for it. So in a sane world, the charges would be dropped, but this is not a sane world. And that's it for the Norse games, so let's finally tally up this sumbitch. So, with all these charges accounted for, the defendant faces the possible charges of 81 counts of trespassing, 1 count of squatting, 64 counts of destruction of property, 581 counts of petty theft, 79 counts of felony theft, 5 counts of possession of weapons for dangerous purposes, 5 counts of possession of illegal weapons, 5 counts of possession of weapons of mass destruction, 1 count of possession of explosives, 1 count of arson, 4 counts of hunting without a license, 1 count of Grand Theft Auto, 126 counts of animal cruelty, 10 counts of prison breach, 1 count of attempted prison breach, 4 counts of uttering threats, 2 counts of disturbing the peace, 1 count of resisting arrest, 28 counts of abuse of a corpse, 120 counts of assault and battery, assault with a deadly weapon, aggravated assault, and 116 counts of assault causing bodily harm. Then 14 counts of assaulting a police officer, 25 counts of dismembering a human body, 13 counts of attempted murder, 1 count of drug production, 1 count of child abuse, 1 count of child abandonment, 1 count of terrorism, 1 count of conspiracy to commit terrorism, 8 counts of breaking and entering, 1 count of felony harassment, 1 count of vandalism, 101 counts of first-degree murder, and finally, 5 counts of second-degree murder, for a total of 141 concurrent lifetime sentences on top of an additional 10,200.5 years, and a $53,500 fine. Yeah, that's a bit much. I guess when your adventures are a lot longer, a lot more open, and have a lot more potential side activities, you have a much greater chance at committing large-scale crime. So with that deciphered, how does the defense plead? Alright, so the prosecution is dead, so he's just gonna go through his usual checklist. If you enjoy what the courtroom produces and wish to support it, you can like this video, leave a comment telling us what you think, subscribe, and hit the notification icon so you never miss out on a courtroom battle like this. The Patreon is still on hiatus, but you can feel free to pledge if you feel so inclined. Otherwise, this has been the courtroom of Tactical Bacon Productions, and we will see you next time. Stay crispy, my friends. In the beginning of the game, when Baldur shows up, Kratos threatened him, and uttering threats is an offense that can carry— Holy f***. I did not expect that. Holy sh**, fucking shit myself.